Welcome everyone to today's episode. So here I am. It's the start of a long weekend in Australia. It's Friday afternoon, and I have a wonderful guest, Andy Goram. Now, I was on Andy's radio show back in earlier December or late November. We recorded it. It's just crazy before Christmas, called Engage for Success Radio. And when we were talking, Andy let me know how he's got his own podcast, so which I'm going to be recorded on his podcast next week, and he's on mine this week. So it's worked out absolutely beautifully because my new series for 2025 starts in February, and Andy will be in the new series. But if you've caught my summer series, you would have heard my interview with Andy on the Engage for Success radio show, as we're playing just, that one again, because it was an excellent and fun episode where we talked about the multi-generations of our customers as well as our team members. But today it's all about Andy. Now, Andy is the owner of Biz Juicier Consulting. Get to more good stuff. So Andy, he says, I help organizations become stickier from the inside out. A stickier organization is a place where the people who work there thrive and love what they do, and where more customers stay with you and recommend you to others because they love what you do and why you do it. And truly, that's what business is all about. It's about getting the right people in the doors, having them return, tell them about your wonderful business, but also getting the right team. So welcome, Andy. It's so lovely to have you here on my podcast this week.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's always lovely to see your smiley face. Instantly puts me at ease. It's lovely to see you again.
Well, that's good. Yes, yeah. And we we're just saying before we press the button, a couple of the dreaded lurgies that hit London and England, where Andy is, in the winter time. But we'll send you some of our summer warmth to you.
I'm just looking at this video we're recording on. I feel incredibly pale and pasty compared to you, Michelle.
Oh, I thought all Londoners, all English people look that colour. No,
It's basically a pale grey. That's what we have. Yeah.
Well, I like a little bit of colour, but we've got beautiful sunshine here at the moment, and the weather is lovely. But I don't know. One moment we've got rain, and then next minute there's hail, and then there's sun. It's just a crazy time. But let's talk about you, Andy, because that's what it's all about. And when we had that conversation before, about the stick, I'm thinking, it's sticky, and it's a funny word, sticky, isn't it?
I know. Do you know what? There are so many things I get myself in trouble. This is the problem with being an ex-marketer. You overthink stuff. So, Biz Juicer as a company was about, I think, trying to release all the latent talent that's inside a business. So I had this image of, just releasing the great stuff inside a business, right? Just by engaging with it. And then when you launch a company and learn that, people are like, well, what do you make? Juice? What is it? Orange? Is it? You're like, no, that's kind of gone wrong. And then the sticky thing, and weirdly, a few people now started to call me the sticky guy, which again, I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing. From honest intention, stickiness is about, I guess, trying to retain your talent and become an organization that because the people inside your business are having such a great time, having real impact, feeling like they're on top of their game, you just naturally attract, new talent, right? And as a marketer, I'm like, well, that sounds pretty sticky. That's a great word. We'll use that. And then, Michelle, I don't need to sort of go into too much detail, but people come up with all sorts of stuff about what sticky's really about.
I'm sure they do, but it's funny when you first said sticky, I was thinking, like on a hot summer's day, you go and you eat an ice cream and it inevitably ends up all over your face. So it's all sticky and your hands are sticky. And then I started to think, no, when it comes to business, to me, stickiness is about that Velcro, and it is those two sides of Velcro that come together, the customer and your employees. And that's where that stickiness is, isn't it?
Absolutely. If I'm really honest, I think the inspiration for the whole sticky thing came from that book, Tipping Point. Because that talked about sticky business and sticky organizations from a sort of like communication perspective, how you made yourself more attractive to customers and and made them more loyal to you.
Yes.
And my life as a marketer back in corporate days, I spent millions of pounds and dollars. My financial directors may have said wasted millions of those dollars, but all that money trying to convince customers why to consider us, why to buy from us, why to play with us, why to recommend us to others. And embarrassingly, in the early part of my career, 2/5 of nothing I spent on actually engaging the internal audience or the guys on the shop floor or in the bar or the restaurant with who we are, what we stand for, who we stand with, why that's important, how you show up in all of that. None of that until the day that whatever the light bulb, why it happened, turned on, and you started to intentionally communicate and engage with the guys who had the brand in their hand.
Yes.
But then when we did, Michelle, I mean, it shouldn't be a big surprise, right? But when we did, amazing things just started to happen.
Yes. And that's the thing. And that's where that stickiness comes in, doesn't it? And it's that
Yeah.
consistency. It's being there. I think we hear so often, and particularly these days, I know when I first started out in business, it was that door to door. I had my tri-fold little flyer that I'd printed off myself with the home printer, which cost a phenomenal amount of money back 30 plus years ago. And, going to the industrial area, hopping out of your car and, walking into businesses and saying, well, these are my services and ringing up, we've got the yellow pages, although they don't exist anymore here, but, this massive encyclopedia of business and just going from A to Z. But it was that stickiness that finally people remembered who you were. And today you hear so often that they go, oh, I tried it. I tried an ad on Facebook. I didn't get any opt-ins or downloads or an email list or whatever. I'll try something else. And that's what you hear then from those marketers, that write those amazing books, go, you've got to have that consistency. And so do you see that's where the sticky part comes in? You've got to have this little bit of fortitude about you, don't you?
I, I think there's definitely a lot of that. I sort of think about stickiness from a cultural perspective a lot, and I think well, certainly what I see. I'd be interested to get your opinion as well, Michelle. What I end up seeing from a culture perspective is, I mean, it's not a new thing focusing on your culture, although it feels like it is, but it really isn't. People have been doing it for years. Other people haven't. They haven't seen the worth in it. I think what the problems that I see around the stickiness thing is people think that you can complete culture. I've put some values. I've got a purpose. I've got a mission statement. I've stood up at a conference. I've told everybody about it. Bang, tick.
That's it.
Culture's done now. Everybody knows what we're
Yes.
doing. Let's get on with it.
Mm.
And the reality is, creating an environment where people can really do more than they thought they could without even thinking about it
Mm.
really takes total consistency. It's a lifelong pursuit. The job of a CEO is, chief engagement officer, basically. They have to be the cheerleader,
Mm.
constantly referencing this stuff, right? If they're not, who is? Because whatever is shown to be important at the top of an organization ultimately is what is seen as important down throughout that organization. So
Mm.
for me, yeah, consistency and stickiness comes from, look, this stuff isn't just for a 6-month initiative. This stuff is who we are. And you have to keep referencing that. You have to keep building on that. You have to keep helping people understand how they contribute to that.
Yeah.
But I do think if you do that in any organization, and I know we're both massive, huge geeks, fans of hospitality,
Mm.
even more so in an organization or an industry like that, which, has got an awful lot of stigma attached to it over the years. There's a big
Mm.
lot of work in the UK trying to sort of change the image of hospitality. COVID's given it an absolute kick in the wotsits. The
Mm.
government here at the moment is also trying its hardest to kind of pull it apart and make it even tougher.
Mm.
And so why would young people come to this industry right now with the image that it has? But there are great people out there, not just in hospitality, but in other businesses, that really understand the power of culture and the fact that it is that ongoing thing you've got to keep going. So to me, that's where my essence of stickiness really sort of stems from, if that makes sense, Michelle.
It does. And culture is You're right. You know that they create it, they'll put it on their wall. It's in the handbook. And
Oh yes,
it's in
must
the
have that.
handbook. And I do so much training. I'll say, so what are the values? And it's half the time when the CEO looks at me and goes, oh, I don't know. Or, the checking, under the drawer. I think teamwork's one of them, yes, teamwork's like everything. Or
Integrity, chuck integrity in there as well.
it's great, but it's got to be more than that. And you're right, it's about that culture. It's actually designing that culture. But, I had a conversation a few months ago, and I was starting to think, we look at cultures and we think, oh, everybody that comes into that culture, they have to be. They have to have that same thought, that same thinking, that same way of this is how we do things. And then I started to think, you know what, we need that diversity of
Mm.
thought. So when you talk about this stickiness, I'm thinking also, do you see that opportunity to have somebody like literally walk past and go, I'm drawn to that. I may not be exactly what that culture is looking for, but I'm going to create something that's going to work well with that culture. And
Yeah, look, I think that's such a great question. I mean, how many days have we got for this conversation, Michelle? I mean, I think when it comes to things like that in culture, you can split this up into loads of things. You could take an example like Patagonia, right? Classic example of a company that is, it's like we have I don't know if is a stick of rock. Do people understand what a stick of rock is in Australia? Probably not. It's a big long candy that you put a
yes,
name and the name is all the way through it, right?
yes,
And you take a company like Patagonia, that the culture and values and purpose of that business is right the way through that, right the way through that business. And nowadays, anybody that ends up being attracted to work for Patagonia is just almost drawn by that purpose because it really
yes,
connects with them. For me, if you can, in that instance, have a business that really understands the connection between what drives the business and what drives the people within it, brilliant,
yes.
great.
Mm,
But there's also the case, I think, that where is my place in this business? I don't think we're looking for loads of robots and automatons, right? We
mm,
want for a business to kind of grow and thrive, we would need a whole host of different people understanding where the business is going,
yes,
really understanding how they contribute. But given that kind of like, if you can think of a two-circle Venn diagram between the elements of conformity, the things we just have to do because the
mm,
business needs them, but the freedom to self-express at the
mm,
same time within that kind of framework of why we're here,
yes,
then I think that's a great thing to be. I think that's a great thing for a company to be because it really understands what it's there for and encourages people to find how they contribute, but also isn't afraid to tell and show people
mm,
this is how you add value. We talk about
yes,
the sort of the three things that people want from businesses of being seen, heard, and valued.
mm,
Well, it's no good just telling someone, "Oh yeah, we really value you," because that,
mm,
as humans, we need a little bit more information
yes.
than that.
Like, yeah,
It's like, well, how?
yes,
How
yeah,
do I?
yeah.
And how many people have actually had a conversation with someone to say, "Yeah, this is how I really see you adding value." And those sort of conversations, I think, are really important to liberate that spirit in people to try and unleash this thing we're all after about discretionary effort
Mm,
at work. You know,
yes.
I think those things are really important.
They are. And you're right. I think, people we sometimes look at applicants when they come in and we choose them because we know that they're going to fit in. But
Mm.
sometimes you need that bit of scratchiness. You need that person who, as you said, they've still got to believe in what the vision is, and they've still got to go by what the rules are. But we need them to come in with different ideas because it challenges us. And I know probably about 20 years ago in the hospitality industry, there were a lot of sacred cows that just needed to be moved on. And it took quite a while, but it made such a difference. And it wasn't that they were wrong, they just no longer fitted where the industry or where the businesses were going. But it needed people to come in and challenge them, and for people to listen.
I
Mm,
think that's a challenge for brands right across the piece, right? Because
mm,
brands are all about consistency, it's all cookie cutter. But I think we're trying to sort of, when we're dealing with businesses where there's a human element,
mm.
And no more truer than hospitality. You know what we get to do every day, I think, is a bit of a gift. I don't think
Mm.
everybody sees it that way, but I think it's a bit of a gift because it's mainly people interacting with people. And
Yes.
you know what it's like. If you go for an experience, it's got an amazing process behind it, and your experience is great. You don't really run around telling everybody, "Oh my God, the process in this place is just amazing." Unless you're someone like me who maybe geeks out on that sort of stuff, you just don't do it. It's always about those little 3 second spotlight moments that happen when you've had a connection with the individual who is serving you
Yes.
or treating you or looking after you
Mm.
or speaking to you. It's those connections. And I think this is the thing about uh, brands, particularly in hospitality. We've got to help people coming in understand, yes, what that offer is all about,
Mm.
but how they bring themselves to that offer and enhance it and make
Yes.
connections with guests, customers, whoever it is. That's the secret behind it. And
Mm.
that, well, can I give you an example, maybe?
Yes.
So back in my uh, late corporate days, early consulting days, when I was working in bingo, and by the way, I don't think anybody ever really wakes up in the morning and goes, I must work in bingo, right? But I had an amazing time there because customers in a bingo hall spend an awful lot of time in there, like 3 or 4 hours a day.
Mm.
My teams are in there interacting with these people on a continual basis, a long time. But if you
Mm.
ever spoke to a member of the team, asked them what they did, they'd say, "Oh, we shovel chips, French fries, or we clean machines, or we give out coins for interval bingo. That's what we do." But if you've ever sat like I had to and watched what actually happened in a bingo hall for a long time, what you really see is every single member of staff in that hall is making little connections with customers,
Yes.
like
Mm.
either with themselves or introducing customers to other people. And when
Mm.
you think about the large demographic that is really seen in the mainstay of a bingo hall, oftentimes when they're there, that is their social interaction for the day. They don't see anybody else outside of that.
Mm.
Now, when we were doing a big rebrand exercise, I had the opportunity to kind of do this sort of stuff we're talking about today. So I sat down with a whole bunch of staff, asked them what they did, and then I just floated the notion that really is that what you do? Because I've
Mm.
watched you, and I think you're kind of banishing loneliness. You're
Yes.
creating new relationships. You're
Mm.
forging friendships, and this is not meant to sound as twee as it's going to come across. But honestly, Michelle, you end up seeing people take a second look at themselves. They sit up a little taller, the
Yes.
shoulders go back, the chest comes out. And
Mm.
then the next time they're on the floor, they're so much more conscious and intentional about that thing.
Mm.
They're doing that even better. With real knobs and bells and whistles on, they have a sort of renewed sense of purpose. And I think this is the tricky thing when we think about engagement and culture. When you say those sorts of things, there are people who go, "Yeah, whatever,"
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
because it sounds too nice.
Mm.
But the reality is, if you take the time to do that, engage and really understand what's going on, that can be the liberator. That's how people then connect. They
Mm.
don't then need loads of scripts and processes to kind of deliver an amazing experience for customers because they're in and they
Yeah.
understand their role and they can bring themselves to that. And I
Mm.
think that's what we're after, really.
Mm. And you're right, it's showing them what they do that they don't even know that they're doing, how, being so unintentional, how important it is. Now, here in Australia, we don't have bingo halls, but we have bingo at our
Okay.
clubs and our hotels, and we have all sorts of bingo, but it's always been it's probably been a butt of jokes in
I bet.
Australia, in that if, oh, the bingo players, all they drink is water, chips and gravy, fill up the car park, and always whinge. Now, I'm asking my listeners, have you ever played a game of bingo? Because I did a couple of times during our research with mystery shopping, and it is hard. But
Mm.
the warning is you make sure you sit in a seat that doesn't belong to another player.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because
This is a
that,
universal rule.
yes, do not sit. But, and I have said categorically for decades now, I would rather have 50 bingo bottoms in a venue than an empty venue. And
Mm.
they may come in for bingo and maybe spend only a small amount of money, but that money adds up. And then when they come back for a special celebration, they'll go to that venue because those staff are being nice to them. And it's the staff. It's not, and it's the connection. It's not the big, pretty lights, it's the staff in that room, whoever the caller is, or handing out the blotters or whatever. So I think it's a beautiful way to connect people. I really do. That
Yeah, you got
connects
to.
all walks of life.
I agree, but you've also got to think about the lifetime value of those
Yes,
individuals, not
yes.
just the one-off transaction that
Mm,
they give. You know, maybe if you looked at that, however many visits that they make versus the one-off customer who comes in and splurges a load of money, but you never see them again,
yeah,
you might look at it differently. You might
yes.
look at it differently.
And how that ripple effect is, because they'll tell others, this is a
Yeah.
really nice place. The staff are lovely. And I think I may even mention it on our last call, perhaps where I know where bingo callers have actually stopped the game because, Mavis is not there, who sat there for the last 10 years in that same spot, got in the car and gone to the home. And they've done that and found either, whatever's happened, but that the care is there, or people mind each other's seats. And as you said, it's a way for people of no matter what their background is, that they can connect over a game of doing some numbers, and it's a bit of fun.
I think so, but I think that's an example of a business that knows what it's about, that knows
Yes.
what its customers are about,
Mm,
and hopefully the people who are delivering that offer have that same sense of understanding and connection. And I think when those things align,
yes.
that's when we do great stuff. That's when we
Mm,
do really, really great stuff.
mm,
But when we forget about that or take it for granted, that's when I think we get a load of, mediocre offers out there. And at
yes.
the moment in UK hospitality, I don't know what it's like in Oz. There's too much grey, mediocre, overpriced
Mm,
offers out there where people just going through the motions, getting stuff done, charging a lot for it, and you just walk away thinking, I just totally been ripped off. Why did I bother?
yeah.
And then the sad thing is, the things that stand out are the offers where there is literally moments of human connection.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and the sad thing for me, as someone who loves hospitality as an industry, is that those are becoming standout things rather
Mm,
than everywhere.
yes.
Um, but it shows it's possible. Shows it's possible.
Yeah, it does. And it comes back to that stickiness again. It's that behavior that they continue to show when they're with their customers and their peers that are working with them. It sticks. So you talk about your 7 steps to stickiness and
Mhm.
how highly regarded it is. Can you give us an overview of these steps without giving away all your secret sauce of your 7 steps and share a practical example of how they've been applied in a hospitality business?
Yeah,
Your,
well, I will do my very best. Listen, I don't know if there is a secret sauce. I'll go through these 7 things quickly to give an over, because I don't think they're earth-shattering. I really don't. I think the combination and the consistency of them, that's where the secret sauce comes in.
yes.
I just think there's a lot of things in this list that perhaps over time have been taken for granted. They're not in any particular order. I think they sort of run together, but different organisations might find that they're stronger on some and weaker on others.
Mm,
But for me, it all starts with being able to create and tell an engaging story about what this business is about. I think as humans, we love a bit of certainty. We're not great with ambiguity.
no.
And I think at the very start, to know where a business is going and why it's going in that direction and helps the story that helps you see your place in it is an incredibly important
Mm.
foundation.
Oh, I
But I
like
think
that.
again, that's taken for granted, right? But I
Mm,
think if you can tell a story and a story that is told personally, but allows you to kind of like be able to tell it on in your own from your own perspective, and
mm,
I think those are the best stories. So that ties together all the sort of vision, mission, all that sort of stuff. I think that storytelling is really important. And look, that's how we communicate things on. We've done it for eons, right?
yes.
Give me a list of bullet points. I ain't gonna remember them, Michelle.
No.
Tell me a story that I can kind of follow some breadcrumbs and tell my own version of that, but
Yes.
still have the same sort of essence.
Mm.
I'm in. I'm
Yes.
in. You know, when I do storytelling workshops with people, I'll use the three little pigs as an example of like milestones, and I get people to tell their own version of that story. It's quite scary how dark some parents are with the stories that they've told their kids. You know, it's really
Oh,
quite
I
scary. But
know.
but getting into that storytelling thing, I think is really, really important.
Mm,
Then I think the most important next step is to ensure the promise matches up to reality. And I think this is particularly important when it comes to hospitality, because we talked generations last time out, right?
mm,
I think if you say you're something and we turn up to go to work and it is
mm.
not that way, we're gone.
Yeah, we're out.
We will at the very, very least, we'll disconnect and we'll just turn up, be present, but not give best effort. But if you're not what you say you are, we won't be with you. And today's generation, there's so little stigma in quitting. If they
Oh,
smell that from the off, gone. I
yeah.
mean, again, whether we're the same, we there's been a phenomenon of sort of like mid first shift quitting going on
Mm,
in
yes.
hospitality
Mm,
post COVID. People coming back in to put their toe in the water, back into the industry. Oh yeah, it's all great. You can do what you like. You work when you like. It's all great fun with customers. First busy shift. No,
oh,
I'm gonna go stack shelves. Thanks very
is
much.
that
At
when
least I
they've
know what's
got three
happening.
customers when you talk about being busy? Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. So I really think this comes to being really honest
Yes.
about what the culture is like and what the values are of that business.
Mm,
Um, and to me, that is, if it is, this is hard graft. You're going to
mm,
be working long hours and all the rest of it. Then be honest about that, because there are people that will be attracted by that sort of stuff.
yes.
But
Mm,
please don't paint a picture. I would rather a company doesn't have values if they're not going to use them and live them and they're honest, because actually they'd
exactly.
be more divisive. Right.
Yes.
I
Mm,
think my third step, and this is, I think, where I see the most things taken for granted, is to equip managers and leaders
mm,
with the skills to engage. So
yes.
the conversational skills, to be able to give praise, to be able to give constructive challenge, to
Mm,
have a constructive confrontation, to learn how to build trust,
yeah.
to learn how to show respect, to
Mm,
learn that not everybody wants to communicate like you do, and they don't receive those things like you do. They don't see the world. Now, we have so many accidental managers and leaders, I think, in business, people who were great technically at what they did, and all of a sudden, right, you've got 10 people to look after. They're
yes.
humans, you're a human, get on with it.
Mm,
And what's the biggest issue we see in retention? We're talking about stickiness. It's a problem with your boss,
yes.
and
Yeah.
because you don't communicate, you can't relate, and we
Mm,
don't take time to train these skills. I hate the term soft skills. It drives me bananas because it sort of like denigrates it for some
it
reason.
does.
um,
Yes.
and we take it for granted. But listen, we've all worked for people who we connected with,
Mm,
and we've all worked for people who drove us round the bend.
yes.
I
Mm,
think taking time to help people get performance done through other people is huge,
mm,
huge. So I think that step of equipping leaders and managers to engage, I think, is really, really important. I then think we just need to listen.
mm.
I had a fabulous guy on my podcast who's from your country. I don't know if you've ever spoken to Oscar Trimboli, but he wrote the book How to Listen.
Oh,
He's a really
I have
fabulous
heard of
guy.
him. Mm,
Yeah, he's a fabulous guy. But really listening to your employees and making them feel like they've got a voice, I think today is incredibly important. It goes beyond doing your annual engagement survey.
yes.
It's far more fluid nowadays. You know,
Mm,
what conversations are you having? What's the purpose behind those conversations? Little check-ins, you know. And we did this with a hospitality company. We've got a business in the UK called Flight Club.
hmm.
They're fantastic bar operator that use a load of tech with darts. It's just brilliant,
Mm,
absolutely wonderful. And there was a real lack of connection between managers and leaders and floor staff because they were so busy. It was head down, bum up, crack on.
yes.
And we introduced the whole coffee chat thing as a much more relaxed check-in um, with leaders, managers, members of staff, just to sort of see how's it going, how are you doing, what problems have you
Mm,
got. Look, here's my expectations of you. What do you need from me to kind of like to get there? Really simple, casual
mm,
check-ins. And we saw satisfaction and everything go up. But the business then started to scale. And because it started to scale and not everybody was doing it, they started to put process in behind that. And now we're at a place where we've got to revisit it because it's become a bit tick boxy and actually a bit of a
Yes.
faff rather
Mm,
than where its essence was. So that listening and giving employees a voice, I think, is incredibly important for that connection thing, right?
mm,
If you feel like you've got the ability to challenge, to question, to support, to give new ideas, you talked about perspective and helping to grow a business. That's what we want. We want to create that environment where people
mm,
feel seen, heard, valued, and are able to contribute. So I think that's an important thing.
mm.
I would have a step that is about communication, being an ex-marketer, but I think this is about your word, consistent communication. For me, it's about constantly reinforcing where we are on the mission, how we are seeing great examples of the values, where we're not seeing great examples of the
Mm.
values. Communication in business is probably still the number one problem that we all have. It's like a tsunami of information heading your way the whole time.
Yes.
I think it's the mark of a great business that can trim a lot of that stuff down, really hone in on where we're going, where we've had success, perhaps where we're not, where we need ideas. That
Mm.
I think is really, really important. Then I think specifically step six for leaders particularly is to find your first followers. Because
Yes.
I don't know what it's like for you in the work that you've done, Michelle, but whenever I walk into business, we're doing culture work, the conversation always goes to what we would perhaps call the neg ferrets, the old negative what's it's in your organization, right? If we can just sort out these people,
Yes.
we're laughing.
Yeah.
And business put loads of energy into trying to turn around these laggards,
Mm.
and it don't go anywhere because momentum doesn't work that way.
No.
Momentum works from us seeing people do things and have success, and then we go, oh, okay, we're in. Because in the main, we're pretty cynical, judgmental people.
Mm.
Humans, we want to see success before we leap in. Winning needs witnesses, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I always say to people, go where the sunshine is. When we're trying to sort of gauge momentum, we're trying to get a cultural movement going. Go
Mm.
where the sunshine is. Go and find the people who are already doing this stuff or the people who are desperate for this sort of stuff to happen and
Mm.
tap into their energy because they're the ones that are going to create the momentum.
Yes.
Um, and it's not about getting to 51%. The social science, the phenomenon of it all, from a marketing perspective, the law of diffusion of innovations, the classic bell curve says if you
Mm.
can hit 18%, that's tipping point.
Mm.
So if you think about where all the great energy is in the room, go there. They are your first followers. They are the ones who are going to interpret, tell the story, engage other people, get other people on board,
Yes.
prove the case that this is worth doing. So
Mm.
that's my step six, and that's a fun step. And then the last one, I don't know, it's a bit blasé. It is stick with it. Like we said at the start, right?
Mm.
This is not a one and done job. This is not, we're doing a 3 month culture project to nail culture. It's
Mm.
got to be a consistent thing. So keeping the focus, keeping the importance alive, and re-energizing it, building on it. If
Mm.
the values that we once had don't match up with where we need to be as a business, update them,
Yes.
change them. Just
Mm.
be really clear that when you tell people, do you know what, we need to see this, you need to be honest and say, we don't really show enough of this right now. Because if
Yeah.
you just say all of a sudden, oh yeah, we're going to be magical in our thinking, and people go, well, that ain't us. This is a
Mm.
load of rubbish. It's because we haven't signaled it's something that we need that we don't have. And that's a big mistake. So I think sticking with it, having the energy to keep going when not everybody gets it all at once or
Yes.
when things fail, I think
Mm.
culture has to be an ongoing life's passion. And those are my sort of 7 steps to stickiness. Nothing necessarily radically new, but I think what's rare is an organization that does all those intentionally, consistently, all the time.
Yes. Thank you for sharing those. And you're right, it is having them, but then actually doing something with them, not just having that touch base. Yes, we've done that click. So there's a couple of things there I'd like to sort of tease that a little bit more. I agree with your
Yeah.
step six there, definitely about I call them those champions of change. You need to find who those champions are in your organization, whether you're a business owner or whether you are a CEO of a large organization. You can't do it all by yourself. You
No,
need those that when somebody in the staff room says, "Oh, I don't know about that," they'll go, "Hey, wait on, like I think we could give it a go." So we need them to be talking about the journey, telling the stories about when those experiences have happened to them and why it was good. The other is when you look at those leaders and saying how, that they've got to drive it and have
mm,
those conversations. But I also start to think, we're looking at these four generations in our workplace. We've got to think about particularly those baby boomers and the Gen X and even that top end of Gen Y, what their first jobs were, who their leaders were at the time, and how were they treated. And for some of those, it was do your job, zip your lip, and get your money at the end of the week, and that's it. We're not interested in your opinion. So when they're now being told, well, you've got to engage Gen Z, you've got to be talking to them, and they're thinking, what am I going to talk to them about? I just want them to do work. So, and then they go, well, Gen Z, and then there starts this so much a blame game, but looking down and going, this is not working, something else has got to be done about it. I know working with leaders, and I'm really focusing on that so much more and more over the last few years, is it's helping them find a voice about
mm,
how they lead a team and how
mm.
they can do that with conversation and understanding. Because it's not that they don't want to, they just need the steps on how to do it. What are
I
your
think
thoughts?
that's, yeah, no, goodness me, how much is there to unpack? I think that's where that equipping leaders and managers to engage, that's really, really, really important. It plays to all the things. I think it's also interesting. There's a sort of legacy trap of leadership, isn't there? If you think about, someone today who's being taught by a leader, that leader was probably taught by a leader 20 years ago,
Yes.
and then vice. And so we go back. So all of a sudden, you've got people trying to adapt to the 2020s who were learning from the 2000s, who
Yes.
were then
Yes.
learning from people in the 80s, who were then learning from people from the 60s. Before you go back too far, is it any wonder we have this kind of massive disconnect?
Mm.
Um, I also think, and maybe this is, I don't think it's unique to hospitality, but we kind of wear that awful experience that we might have had from a very autocratic tell leader as a badge of
Mm.
honor and almost pick up the baton. Well, I had to deal with that, so now it's my turn to do that to you.
Mm.
That's just not effective, right?
No.
That is just not. It's a bit like working with chefs in kitchens. Well, when
Mm.
I went into the kitchen, I used to holler and shout at me, and that's what I do with mine. And you ask the question, and did you respond and enjoy that? No, hated it, but it was all part of the job. It's like, hang on a sec, let's just
Stop.
listen to what you've just said,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Why is that going to be effective? So I think that is, part and parcel of it. But I agree with you. How to lead authentically, how to have a conversation with some people because it's a dialogue, whereas they may have been brought up in absolute monologue autocracy. You know,
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of Dan Pink's book Drive. And when
Mm.
we think about the sort of purpose, mastery, and autonomy that comes behind human motivation, I think if as leaders we can tap into that stuff, giving someone a real sense of meaning. You spend so much time at work. If there's no purpose, then your life's almost meaningless. So there's a role for us to play there, right? Um, we are constantly beaten up by people who will say, listen, it's all about the wages. Look, unless you're paying a fair wage, you're not even at the table. You've got to pay a
Oh,
fair wage.
oh,
But if you make it only ever all about that, you're doomed to failure. If you
yes.
if you've, if you've always got to pay the top, it's a spiral down. Your margins are going to get squeeze, 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 squeeze. You've got to help people get more out of it. And feeling like you're on top of your game, learning or succeeding, that mastery piece is
Mm.
becoming more and more important. It's not having to sit in a classroom and learn new stuff. It's just feeling more confident, right?
Yes.
Feeling like you can do stuff, taking on different perspectives. So I think that mastery is really important. But then I think the job of a leader is knowing when to get the hell out of the way, Michelle,
Yeah.
that autonomy.
Mm.
Like I've kind of shown you, this is what I would love you to do. How are you going to do it? Right, brilliant.
Yes.
Go do it. And then I'm going to be the coach in the background that watches you. And when you do an amazing thing, I'm going to stop you and say, oh my, that is tremendous.
Mm.
Brilliant. What happened there? Why was that so good? do more of that. But also, I'm not going to bail out when things are done badly. In the moment, I'm going to come to you and say, whoa, so what happened there? Because that's not what we're looking for. What
Yes.
happened? What
Mm,
were you thinking? What were you feeling? What will you do differently next time? So I think those
mm.
sort of interventions, I think, are hugely important. I think we've got to stop living the legacy of how we were taught,
Yes.
managed, lead. We've got to get with the beat. We've got to understand people need something different. If we want to be really effective ourselves, and let's be honest, look good, be successful, have
Mm,
our teams perform, then we've got to tap into what they need.
yes.
We've
Yeah.
got to have that psychological contract conversation with them to sort of say, here are my very clear expectations for you. I have huge amounts of confidence in you to do it.
Mm.
And then be willing to ask the question, so if that's what I need from you, what do you need from me? And then be hell
Yes.
bent about supporting that, really.
Mm. No, look, I agree. And I think, you made that point before how you've got a lot of managers that are coming in, and we found in and learning those ropes really, really quickly while still
Yeah.
learning their own skill set. And we found that, coming out, the last few years where, perhaps you'd have that frontline person, they'd be there for a year, 18 months, maybe even longer, depending on what they were looking for. Then they'd move up into, doing that next step. They've been, they may go to the foyer, or they go into another area, or the dining area, and they move along. However, with the shortages of staff,
Mm,
we were
mm.
seeing more and more often, which I call these green teams. They'd be in there, they'd probably be there 6 months, but they were showing that they had potential. They were switched on, and whoop, all of a sudden, they're a supervisor. Now they're
Yeah.
still trying to learn about here. Now, okay, I'm learning my skills. I've got to manage and lead people that I didn't even know that I was going to. And so you're thinking this is just putting this added pressure. So I like what you said, Andy, when, with having a leader to step back and observe them and intervene and saying, great job. Or, as you said, what could we have done better? What happened there? How's that making you feel? Instead of coming, oh, look, just move over, Andy, and let me do it, and I'll show you what you have to do. Now I know it's going to be quicker and easier and faster, and you'll get what you want, but that's not helping them, is it?
No, that's not helping
No,
them grow at
no,
all.
it's not.
I'm coaching some individuals at the moment who are really struggling with exactly what you've talked about. And we've kind of phrased it going from mate to manager. One day I'm
Yes.
on the floor with all my mates. The next day I've got to tell them what to do.
Mm,
And well, telling them what to do is kind of the wrong thing to start with, right? And we
mm,
try and get people to understand themselves. I think you have to have a good bit of self-awareness about what's going on with my own behavior and where's that coming from and how can I spot the signs, right? The
mm.
good stuff and the bad stuff. And then really try and help them to think about the other person's perspective. Empathy can get totally misconstrued as being some sort of happy clappy stroke club.
Mm.
It's not about sympathy. It's about, hey, look, I was in your shoes. I kind of get it. This is the job we've got to do. How do we move forward? Here's maybe what worked for me. Why don't you try that? Or if you've got any other ideas, let's kind of go through it. I
Yes.
think we also try and help them make that transition from being, an operator, manager, and leader. When you're in operating mode, your head down, bum up, work, work, work. When you're managing, it's the process of getting a task done.
Yes.
And then leading is about influencing behavior.
Mm.
And I think people struggle with the fact when they take those leadership positions on, we're so conditioned to actually it's as many things as I do. It's how busy I look. It's
Yes.
not. It's not. It's about
No.
how effective you are
Mm.
with getting your people to do the things you need them to do.
Yes.
And that is a big lesson for people. I don't want to. I really don't want to sound preachy. It's not what but it's such a big lesson that people don't get sat down very often and have it explained to them that
Mm.
there's a difference between managing a task and leading behavior. When you get into
Yes.
lead, it's not about filling your day with polishing cutlery and throwing plates around and everything. And yes, you might feel great. It might make you look lovely when it's really busy to jump in and help the team. Yes, that's great. But actually, your job is to help that team grow in skills and in confidence and in belief and
Mm.
in performance.
Yeah.
And your job there is takes on more of a coaching role
Mm.
than a managing role, you know?
Yes. Yeah, very much. And then we get team members who want to stay. We get that
Yeah.
stickiness once again,
Yeah.
and we retain, because that's the thing. And it's not just hospitality, you're right? It's all industries where we're seeing people, they'll come in and they'll give it a couple of days, a week, a month, maybe a couple of months if you're lucky. But if it doesn't suit them, they're out the door. And we need them to stay, but they won't stay if A, we've promised them a lot in the interview and it hasn't come to fruition when they start, or they have the manager who doesn't share, just micromanages or takes over, or they just don't have that connection with those others in the team. So
Yeah.
how do you see that as a challenge? How do, I think I shared this with our last conversation. I always have this tongue-in-cheek joke that, Gen Zs will only come in the inner door if they're holding the hand of another Gen Z, because it's that group mentality. And that's lovely. Group work at school, group work at university. They've got group, on, cohorts all around the world on social media. Very different to other generations, particularly, Gen X and baby boomers and further on. But who are more that solo, you don't ask anybody for help because, that'll be a sign of weakness. How do we see that challenge in the workplace of creating a workforce that's really connected and the retention rates start to grow? Because we seem to have more people out of the workforce by choice than we have than ever before. It doesn't matter what industry. It's police, it's hospitals, it's hospitality. It's just, they're all saying we need more people to apply. But how do we get them to apply?
But this is why you've got to. This is why I think you've got to make it more than the paycheck. I think you've got to find some worth in what you do, and it doesn't have to be a lofty purpose and all that kind of stuff. But just find some connection. We're sitting here going, well, why haven't people got more connection? Because we don't spend enough time talking about it. We don't spend enough time. I'm a massive fan of Lencioni's triangle, 5 dysfunctions of a team, and the base of that triangle is trust.
Yes.
How much time do we really intentionally spend thinking about how we're earning and building trust with our teams? How conscious are we of all the little things that we maybe do unintentionally that are making little leaks in that bucket of trust where it goes down? It's a constant kind of trying to fill it up. So I think really focusing in on trust enables you then to bring in challenge and growth, because if you trust someone and they challenge you, they have better thoughts for you, they have better expectations for you. They're not just trying to sort of like undermine you or score points against you. So I think that trust thing's really important. But I think this thing about perspective and understanding, a couple of things I would share. Firstly, can't believe we're still talking about the C word, but COVID, right? I have a friend who runs an independent ad agency, and he thought he was Mr. Connection with his team. He would run around his wonderful London open plan office, touching people legally and making them feel lovely, and doing all that kind of like retrospectively superficial connection stuff. When COVID hit and the office was shut and everybody starting to work remotely, he was, in his own words, forced to have conversations with individuals over Zoom. And what he said to me in a conversation during that time where we were trying to keep each other sane, he said, I can't believe it, Goro. He said, I really thought I had really good connecting skills with people. I thought I really understood my team, thought I really knew my team. I knew nothing about my team. It's only since I've taken the time to have conversations and actually be curious and ask questions, which felt forced at the start because I have to do it. Now it's become a natural thing. He now understands far more about what motivates his team, what scares his team, what drives his team, things they would love to be able to do. It's been intentional in those conversations. You talked about secret sauce. Sometimes I feel like a fraud on this topic, because it is really basic stuff that we have either chosen to ignore, taken for granted, or just don't think it's important because we're here to do hard things like drive numbers. And the reality is, if we're trying to get people to do stuff, we have to have a sense of connection and belonging. If we don't have those things, we cannot operate at our fullest potential. So I think those things that's one thing I would say. The other thing I think you make such a great point about perspective and generations. I was working with a really lovely, intelligent pub GM the other week, and he came up with a beautiful line halfway through the program. He's like, I just don't like people, and I especially don't like young people. And I was like, wow, we got some work to do, love. And he grew so much on this program just by cooling his jets and thinking about perspective and other
Mm.
people's. And it came to fruition. He came back and told a wonderful story about something as simple as in his pub, he thought it would be a good idea because he'd understood recognition to do an awards thing for all of his members of staff. And in
Mm.
his head, he had a best salesperson, best customer service. He had about 3 awards.
Yes.
And he said to the youngest elements of his team, look, I want you to put an awards thing together. Here's my idea for the awards. It's up to you. You do it. Almost letting go of it, but going it.
Yeah.
And they said, great, yeah, we'd love to do that. And he let them have free reign. I think there's about 35 people in the team, and he pitched up to this awards thing at the end of a session, and these Gen Zs had developed a program where every single person in that pub was recognized for their own individual thing. They'd
Ah,
made up
yes.
individual awards, rewards, if you like, for what somebody brought to that team. And
Mm.
this was a crystallizing moment for that dear GM because it
Yes.
really showed what he had completely missed. For him,
Yes.
rewards, awards, here's my categories, that's what we do, bosh.
Mm.
People get it,
Yes.
they don't. What the Gen Zs wanted, there's this, it's about collective. It wasn't
Mm.
about being fluffy. These awards were genuinely saying, hey, we recognize you for bringing this to that team.
Yes.
And this GM loved it. The
Yeah.
the team loved it. There was this real kind of spirit of, I don't know, a bit like that bingo story when people sort of worked
Mm.
out what they were there for. Somebody else telling you what you bring and what they value from you. That's a huge affirming thing to
Yes.
feel.
Yes. Yeah.
And he has noticed a difference in attitude, in even things like punctuality, in
Mm.
in in staying a bit late and helping out, in people being more flexible with their schedule. If and
Mm.
now they've got these connections and they understand each other a bit more. If someone can't do a shift, they're sorting it out amongst themselves.
Mm.
Yeah, amazing changes for something as simple as that.
Yes, yeah. But hats off to him to handing it over to the Gen Zs, but then actually taking on board what they had created. Because he could have quite easily turned around and gone, oh, that's not going to work, or nobody's interested, and gone back to his way, which would have just stifled everything. But you're right, it's that group connection again. Let's acknowledge what our peers are doing, and it could be something so simple at the end of the night. Fred, Mary, they stayed back to help me, mop the floor so we could get out by midnight or whatever it might be. But it's acknowledging those little things that make such a big impact across the
We
team.
make loads
Yeah.
true, and we make loads of assumptions. I've sat in a few sort of seminars and what have you with hospitality, and I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm often surprised when people get up on stage and who had tremendous success, sustained success, and when they're asked about how they're dealing with these Gen Zs and generations and staffing and all the rest of it, their answers to some are like the clouds have parted and the sun
Mm.
shines down and it's like this amazing new thing. And what they're really saying is, well, yeah, we kind of just speak to everybody and see what they're up to and see what's going on, and then we kind of adjust and we share. Everybody shares that information. We check in with each other so that actually, if Michelle has to leave half hour early to go and pick up her kid on a shift, no one's griping that why does Michelle always have to leave early because
Yes.
it's going to go round and come round. But
Mm.
but half the audience are making assumptions like, well, no, you got to tell them what to do, and then they can deal with it. And it's like it just doesn't work like that anymore.
No,
And it
no.
is no less it's no less performance based. It's just trying to get the best from people.
Yes.
It's trying to liberate that talent, that effort.
Mm.
It's not trying to bash it out of them,
Mm.
and I think that's where stickiness comes from. If I work somewhere where I feel like I'm doing good stuff, I'm getting paid fairly for what I'm doing, I've got connection with the people I'm working with, I've got connection with the people I'm serving, maybe wandering around an Amazon warehouse for a few more quid an hour on my own, maybe that's not so great. We're starting to see a bit of that change now. There was a lot of that switch
Mm.
out of hospitality because it's shut down, and
Yes.
people going earning, much better wages for seemingly less physical work
Mm.
elsewhere, and they're starting to kind of drift back because that connection's not there. There's a
Yes.
wonderful
Yeah.
thing in hospitality. We got to make more of this. We've got to
Mm,
stop all this badge of honor wearing about how tough it is and what unsociable hours it is.
mm.
We've got to stop all of that. We've got to reframe it. We've got to be honest about it. When I did my service training in the States, I was working 3:30 in the afternoon till maybe 12 o'clock at night shifts. My social circle changed.
Yes. Yes.
It changed. I loved it. I loved
Mm,
those shifts. I loved what happened during them. I loved what happened afterwards. I'd get up in the morning and go and play basketball. I'd come back to work. I'd eat lunch with my friends. I'd then work through the night. We'd then go out. Da, 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 da. It changes. It's
mm.
different. And it's not
Yes.
for everybody, but there's plenty of great opportunities for people. And flexible working today, hospitality is almost made for that. We can squeeze in hours all over the place for people who perhaps don't want to do that or can't do that. We should be taking advantage of this
Yes.
situation.
Definitely.
I get a bit tired of the whole, it's hard, it's tough, it's horrible. It's also incredibly rewarding as
It
a
is.
place to work.
It is. And we always need it. I mean, we'll always have that human connection. And hospitality industry is one of those areas. I was on a podcast the other day and the chat said, oh, to me, do you think AI will take over? And I said, AI is fantastic, but it will never break that human connection. And it was quite interesting on our local news here last night. It was a news segment, so they're actually advertising courses now at a local college with young people to sit in a room and have conversations, actually pick up the telephone and have a conversation. And my daughter, who's 26, she said, Mum, I know friends that they'll only SMS, like, or text or whatever they want to do, their fiancés or their boyfriends. And I said, what's wrong? Just pick up the phone. And it's so easy just to text. But when they start having those conversations, that's where we have those connections and that's where we build the business, which is so important. And that's why people, once again, that stickiness comes together because people want to
I,
be together.
I just love it. I think I've bored you with this before. I'm such a massive fan of two things. I love the book Unreasonable Hospitality. If
Yeah,
anybody
yes, yes.
hasn't
I've
read
got it
that yet,
right in
please.
front of me.
It's,
I've
it
got,
is so,
oh, let me see. You can see my head. Here we are. I give it out.
yay, love that book. Oh
So
my
I love
gosh.
it. I've got it on Audible, but I give these out for my leadership program. And
Brilliant.
it is just so good. But isn't it interesting, without giving the whole story away, how they were on this trajectory to get there and then realized all the things that were started to, you know, miss out on and they had to go back and review it. But
Made
wow,
it made
great
it
book.
made it too complicated, lost its essence,
Yes.
right? Lost the connection.
Yes.
Um, so I'm a massive fan of that book. Anybody who works in hospitality or is thinking about, a career in hospitality, you have to read that book. I'm not
Yes.
on commission. I'm
No,
just
no,
inspired
I'm
by it.
I'm I'm the same.
And I think the essence of it with Will Guidara there, and if people who haven't watched The Bear either on Disney, that program is amazing. And the episode Forks, I'm gonna put out there because what happens in the episode Forks, where this one character totally begins to understand what experience in hospitality is about and what their purpose in life is and the impact that we have on other people. It's a goosebump moment of telly for me
Ooh,
because that is the essence of what we get to do. If we could just tap into that and we could just understand that, not just for guests, but for our employees,
mm,
I am totally, totally confident we're going to see amazing things happen in our businesses.
yeah. I think we could talk for hours, but I think that's
I'm
just
so sorry,
and
Michelle.
I think I've got 1,001 other questions, but I think that's a really good way to finish this segment this time because I'd love to have you back, later on in the year because there is so much more to connection, communication, and as you put it, having that stickiness that will increase business, attract the people that want to work there, keep the people that are perfect, and bring back those customers because it's all about the human connection. We cannot live without each other.
We could try, but it ain't fun.
And it wasn't. And we found that we can do it in whether you want it in small doses or big doses, that's your choice. And as you said, with hospitality, it brings people together. And as we know, it doesn't matter what culture you're from, sitting across the table and breaking bread with somebody, is that quintessential point of human life. Let's have a conversation, even if we don't even speak the same language. It's a beautiful environment to be in, the hospitality industry. But not just that, it's all industries where we need people and that connection. So before we wrap up, Andy, what is something that you would like to leave my listeners with about the wonderful programs that you have, and yeah, your theme of stickiness?
I I can send you a kind of like a one sheet, right, that you can maybe put in your show notes that sort of shows
Wonderful.
some of the things that I do. I
Love that.
I'm really rubbish at selling myself, right? So I'm not here to sort of say, oh, buy this, but I think what I would like to leave behind is maybe three things for people to maybe think about doing, and they may sound like really blinking obvious things, but
Mm,
I would like people to be conscious and intentional in their choice to do these things. I think the first thing to do, without wanting to sound like a guru or whatever it is, try and help people understand what the slightly bigger meaning of what your business is trying to do, the purpose behind it, and help people understand what theirs is. And by the way, once you have a purpose, it's a huge kind of direction. I lost mine when I came out of corporate,
mm.
really lost for a while, lost a load of confidence, lost trust in myself. But when I regained and found my purpose again, everything kind of aligned. So I would try and help people understand the meaning behind what they do. Um, I think we're so conditioned to going where problems are and sorting out issues is that we forget to praise the stuff that's great. So
Yes.
I think please, authentic recognition and praise. Don't underestimate how important that is. Don't
Mm,
just say it's your turn to say well done or thank you for turning up.
mm.
When you really see excellence, when you really see someone, even in the process improvement, please recognize it, because that is a huge trust builder.
Yes.
And I think it's incredibly important. And then I think it's like we said a lot of this conversation, double down on thinking about all these poor, young, or even experienced accidental managers
Mm.
who really could do with some help and understanding how to engage, communicate, build trust, challenge, and coach their teams. Some simple kind of like uh, little modules or even conversations about what it takes to really do that. There's some great work from guys like Professor Paul Zak that talk about 8 practical ways to manage trust.
Mm.
There's Lencioni's work. There's a whole bunch of things. Please spend some time. If you can't do it yourself, get somebody in to help you, right?
Yes.
Because that's where we really do see change.
Mm. Andy, thank you so much for this conversation. As I said, I know we could chat for a lot longer. I'll certainly put that one sheet into the show notes. And Andy, they can connect with you. You're in a whole lot of different areas of social media. You've got LinkedIn, Twitter,
I've got
Instagram,
I'm I'm
emails.
I'm big on LinkedIn, and
Perfect.
the Sticky from the Inside podcast is on Instagram, and it's on X, and you can get in touch with me on the show, and it's andy@bizjuicer.com if you want to have a chat. Anybody who wants to talk about any of this stuff, I'm up for the conversation.
Yeah, and it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Annie. I really appreciate your time. And listeners, as you said, all those will be in the show notes. So reach out to Annie. You can hear he's a man of a lot of talents and a lot of information, but more importantly, a lot of fun. And that's what it's all about. Got to love life.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks.